All right, everybody, welcome to another episode on the MoneyfitMD show. If you're watching us on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast, I'm glad you found us. So, I'm not even going to waste time. We're just going to first of all, welcome our guest because I'm trying to remember my manners. So, welcome Stephanie Pearson.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to have Stephanie tell us about herself later on, but I'm just going to start with the vent of my life, which is why are physicians being taken advantage of when it comes to disability insurance?
Because we don't know what we don't know, and we are ripe for the taking. We want our patients to trust us. I think as a group, we're actually over-trusting.
I mean, it just drives me nuts. And I know that this is the work you do of helping physicians make sure that they're protecting themselves when it comes to disability insurance. But I just hear so many stories and so many discomfort and so much uncertainty from physicians when it comes to how well they're protected. And that's why I was like, Stephanie, can you just put me on your schedule and come talk to my people about how to stop getting screwed over when it comes to their disability insurance?
I mean, there's a lot to unfold there. Look, the business owner in me says everyone should be talking to people at my firm, right? But the fact of the matter is there are other good people out there. I think that when it comes down to it, you want to make sure that definitions are being explained and that you really understand what's in the contract, right? We talk about not signing things unless we know what's in it. But listen, I made that mistake 20 years ago. I didn't know what was in my employment contract. I didn't know what I bought for disability insurance. I didn't know what the hospital coverage was, because you come out of residency or fellowship and it's like, go, 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 right? Do your job. And so you want to believe that if you're going to speak to somebody, that they have your best interest at hand. And unfortunately, within the financial space, we see oftentimes that's not the case. The guy who sold me my policy, it wasn't what I should have had. I didn't have an ongoing relationship with him. I didn't keep pace with my income. I felt very uneducated and not advocated for. And when I needed help, that was really the thing that pushed me over the edge, in that I called to say, hey, I have a problem. And his answer was, well, deal with the carrier, right? And I was like, this is not how I think it should be done, which I realized there's an element of egotism there maybe, but I was like, look, I don't like this, and I don't like this feeling, and I can't possibly be the only one who's had this experience or has felt this way. And that's really how it all started. It was more out of a sense of, I wanted the entire process to be handled differently. I wanted physicians to actually understand this stuff. And part of the biggest problem is, what's our biggest kind of barrier to things? Time, right? Everybody, especially now, right? We're quick dopamine hits. You want answers. Tell me where to sign. I don't have time for this. But I have to say, you have to be willing to invest a little bit of time to really understand this stuff. And there's no standardization of language in insurance, which is, I think, what makes it so confusing. So companies can use the same phrases and define them differently. They can use different phrases and define them similarly. So if two people are talking, if you don't know what the actual definition is, your thought process may not be right. And not because we're dumb. It's not because we're stupid. It's raw ignorance. This is not something we're taught. It's not something that people like talking about, right? I mean, it's hard enough to get them to talk about money in general, let alone talk about something like this that, let's face it, nobody wants to buy. Nobody thinks it's ever going to happen to them. I mean, look, we're all type A physicians, right? There's a certain element of invincibility that kind of comes with our training, right? That we have to be better than, stronger than, more resilient than, whatever the buzzword of the week is. But the fact of the matter is, illnesses, accidents, they don't care, right? They don't say, oh, we're going to do it to that person and not that person. And we all have friends, colleagues in our lives who have had problems. And this is one of those things that, look, I hope you never have to use it. But if you do, it's life-changing. I mean, it's the difference. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I know stories on both ends. It's the difference for some people of keeping their houses, right? Being able to keep their kids in school. I view it as a necessary evil of being an adult.
Okay. So let's just, someone's like, okay, wait a minute. Who is this woman? I love her voice. She looks amazing on camera. She sounds like she knows what the heck she's talking about. But tell our audience, like, you are a physician. How did you become an expert in disability insurance? Was this the plan? Did you intend to be here? And what make it make sense to our audience, please?
So I am an OBGYN, and unfortunately, I was kicked in the left shoulder during a difficult patient delivery. She was actually one of my favorite patients, but she came in complete, couldn't get her epidural. And look, it's called labor, not a walk in the park, as many of our women listeners can attest. And she just got me in the right place. I ended up with a torn labrum. My first orthopedist called me a word that starts with a P and ends with a Y and said that professional baseball pitchers pitched with torn labrums, so I should be able to do my job. So I did what most women physicians would do, and I put my head down and I figured out how to compensate until I couldn't. I ended up developing a frozen shoulder. My next orthopedist said, don't worry, we'll operate and have you back to work in 12 weeks. And that was 11 years ago this summer. I have considerable range of motion deficits and nerve damage in my left arm. I have not been cleared to do OB or operate. And I learned a lot the hard way. I found out that my hospital group benefit didn't cover work-related injuries. I would have been better off if I fell off my bike. My workman's comp claim initially got denied because they said, well, the accident occurred, my frozen shoulder was idiopathic or my fault because I kept working while I was injured. So I had to sue the state of Pennsylvania. And then I came to find out that the private policy that I thought I bought and I thought I understood was not exactly right. I'm glad I had it. Something's better than nothing, but it wasn't what I should have had. And really, it was out of, to be honest, it was out of a sense of being mad at myself for not being educated that I started pouring myself into it. And even at that time, I didn't think this is where my life was going to go. I mean, I did med mal defense work, which I actually really liked. I liked helping to protect docs. But you time out in Pennsylvania once you haven't laid hands on a patient for a certain amount of years. I did medical editing. I did some biotech consulting, and nothing just felt right. I'm a very guttural person, and I started, no pun intended, GI doctor.
No pun intended.
And I started lecturing to area residencies, really out of a sense of I wanted them to be educated. It really was that simple. And I was sending people to other brokers. And then at one point, my husband was like, hey, you know more about this than most people. maybe this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I thought he was nuts. I really did. But, I started on my own a little bit before Pearson Rabbits, and we turned 7 this year, which is a really huge milestone because most startups fail by that point. So it's just been a nice reminder that this is a need that's out there. And while we don't have the infrastructure to take care of 100,000 physicians, the more people that I can educate and the more people that we can assist in understanding this and creating really a lifelong relationship is what I'm about. And that's kind of how it happened. I realize that's a long story.
No, that was perfect, but I'm just can't wrap my head around the fact that your hospital coverage said they don't cover work-related injury.
So it was the exception to the rule 20 years ago. I would say it's still the exception to the rule, but we have seen more and more of it since the beginning of COVID. And not only are they saying that they're not covering work-related injuries, they're putting in that they're not covering work-related illnesses. And I don't know how we are supposed to prove where we contract an illness from. And the reason, a lot of people are like, that doesn't make any sense. That's the whole point of the coverage. You're thinking rationally, right? You're not thinking like the folks in the ivory tower who's, live and die by dollars for the hospital system. It is a way for the hospital systems to shave cost because there is workman's compensation, which is terrible, admittedly, for physicians, because workman's comp is truly, do you have the ability to work, right? And during one of my hearings, a vocational specialist said I had the aptitude to learn codes and could be a billing secretary. And no offense to any secretaries out there, but that's not why I went to med school. It's not why I went through a demanding residency program, right? And so a lot of these employment policies are getting really creative at what they're hiding in the document as to limits, to claims, things that they're not going to cover. And the real sad part about it is if it's employer paid and it's part of your benefits package, you can't opt out. It is what it is. And so I look at it more from let's look at the devils in the details, and maybe it changes your other life decisions, right? If I had really known that it didn't cover a work-related injury, maybe I would have been better about keeping pace with my income, right? Maybe I would have taken that on myself, but I didn't know, right? And I just think it's really important to have the knowledge, right? It's usually one line on your open enrollment packet. You check a box. These documents are upwards of 100 pages and full of legalese, right? And so it goes back to that. We just don't know what we don't know. And that affects how we plan.
And I think for so many physicians, especially coming out of training, we're so used to not being seen. We're so used to being an inconvenience that when it comes to signing paperwork for a new job, you're just like happy you got a job because we're so used to failing. We're so used to having to prove that we deserve to be there. 5,000 people applied, we only picked 30. Like, that's the norm. So when you get a job, you don't quite wrap your head around the fact that they need you and that you're qualified. So there's still that level of, I'm so glad I got in. That makes you just like sign on the dotted line without reading anything, which you're saying is a disservice to us.
Yeah. I mean, the same thing. And again, I don't really talk about contracts that much, but my employment contract said I needed to be able to do 100% of my job duties. And I had just been asked to be the chairperson of our department. I would have been the youngest. I would have been the first female. And I was unceremoniously terminated the day my FMLA was up because I couldn't do OB and I couldn't operate. Now, I was cleared to do office GYN as tolerated, but I never got the opportunity because my contract said I had to be able to do 100% of my job. And once I got terminated, there was no malpractice insurer that would give me malpractice insurance because it was documented that I had these deficits in my left arm, and that was the end, right? I never thought about that. Again, why? Because nobody tells us to. At least they didn't 20 years ago. I think that people like you, and other folks out there who are really trying to educate our young physicians to do better than we did, right? I think that's really what it comes down to, is kind of learn by our mistakes and don't do what I did, do what I say, right? Kind of like being a parent.
Yeah.
And going back on your, when we get our first job, it's part of the reason it's one of the few reasons it's really important for folks to get this stuff when they're in training. More because, one, I know it's hard to wrap your head around, but you're actually not as busy as you're going to be when you start attending hood. I don't know about you. I worked way harder my first couple of years as an attending than I ever did as a resident. So you actually do have a little bit more time, and there are discounts that you can obtain while you're in training that are going to stay with you for the life of the policy. So if we're talking about making a smart economic choice, and I realize, look, I live paycheck to paycheck as a resident, but you can carve out a little bit, right? And getting your foot in the door when you're young, when you're healthy, when you can get discounts, saves you a lot in the long run. And I think part of our training and part of the indoctrination of medicine is like here and now, right? We all expect quick results, quick stuff. It's kind of hard to play the long game and think that far ahead when you're realizing I have med school debt and I need to get a job and I need to get a house and I need to get, right? Like all the things that we need to do. I just think that there's a little bit of a disconnect in that forward thinking.
So someone is listening right now and they're like, oh crap, I already signed my contract and I already got whatever. Like, what is a practical thing they can do right now? Where can they go look right now to see what they have and ask the question of, is this good or should I be talking to someone else?
I would say that the first thing to do is actually read the document, and then you can reach out. There are lots of people, myself included, that'll do audits. Again, you kind of have to be a little bit careful with who you're speaking to because there are folks out there who are going to tell you to switch just because they'll make more money. We're not like that. But, there are, I'm trying to think of the right word. Sorry, menopause is real and word finding is sometimes a problem. But, I think there are some decent blogs out there. If they go to our website, we have an ebook that really takes you through kind of what you should be looking for. What are some of the most commonly asked questions? I think, short of me promoting myself, but that's a great place to start.
Okay. No, that's helpful because many times when people hear this conversation, I think there can be a gap a little bit, meaning people are like, I already signed the contract, but they don't think that they can look at the contract now. It's like, I didn't read it 10 years ago. Does not mean you cannot read it now. Does not mean you cannot make a change now, right? And it's better for you to listen to this episode and go, oh my goodness, I've not thought about that. I'm so glad I heard that. Now let me take an action so that I'm not walking around afraid that maybe I'm underinsured in future.
No, I mean, look, nothing is written in blood, right? These are contracts. Contracts can be broken, right? And so, it's also not a quick and easy flip. There are also times where I'll speak to somebody and say, look, this may not be the best, but you're 10 years older, you're 10 years more morbid, it's going to be more expensive, right? It's not just a quick yes, no. And I think one of the things that means a lot to me in how we've structured our company is it is almost like going to the doctor. We ask a lot of questions up front, but it's because I want to manage realistic expectations. And I cannot, in good conscience, tell somebody to replace a policy that isn't a better policy all around, right? It's not just one definition. It's not just one piece. There's a whole story, right, that goes into this. And you want to make sure that somebody's asking you hard questions. If they're not asking you hard questions, they're missing a piece.
Got it. Got it. And so now there's now someone that's listening to this and they're like, okay, thank you, Stephanie. I have a policy. I was told, like, what are some of the things that are the lowest hanging fruits for someone that maybe is thinking that maybe should I not? But how can I even look to see, am I good or am I not good? What are some of those terminologies that we're looking for?
I would say the two most important is how do they define own occupation? And there are different phrases. You might pull yours out and it may say true own occ. It may say regular occ. It may say transitional occ. So you want to see what is the definition for your specialty. And then you want to look at what's the definition of total disability. And the reason I bring this up is that most group policies, so employer policies, the definition of total disability is that you can't do your job and not be gainfully employed. And that definition stinks for most of us. I used to say the old adage, I'd give my left arm to be home with my boys more, who were 4 and 6 at the time. Turns out I gave my left arm to be home with my boys more. And after about 6 weeks, I was ready to kill everybody. I am not hardwired to be a stay-at-home parent. I have the utmost respect for them. I think they have the hardest job in the world. I am better at living, having a purpose outside of my home. I love my children. I would die horrible deaths for them. But I am better having a job, right? And having a purpose, I would say. And that definition's not great. Additionally, in employer benefits, often they say it's own occupation, but when you read the definition, it's what's called held to the national economy or the local labor market. It's not specific to what one employee does at one employer site. You want to be covered for what it is you do day in and day out, not what 100 of your colleagues are doing. And when we look at a good, traditionally underwritten policy, you're really going to be covered for what you do. The way that it works is at the time of a claim. So you're saying, hey, I can't do my job anymore. They will literally pull your billing and your calendar for the 1 to 2 years leading up to a claim, and that will dictate what your own occupation is. And the definition of total disability is that you can't do your job regardless if you're gainfully employed in another occupation. So you get to decide what's next, not them. And that's so important because probably the number one thing I hear is, oh, I have a policy through my work, I'm fine. And then you find out you're really not fine. You know, the definitions aren't great, the coverage isn't great. Oftentimes it's a percentage of your base, not a percentage of your income. And there's a maximum benefit. So it may not even cover what you think it's covering, especially if you're a higher earner or the benefit amount is really small. And I will tell you, I have seen group policies as low as $1,000 a month and as high as $35,000 a month. So the range is crazy. And if I were to say to you, your group benefit covers 60% of your base to $2,500 a month, what is that going to do for you? Nothing. It'll pay a bill or two, you know, but I get to be in this unenviable position of showing people why their group benefit is inadequate and what they should be looking at and why these terms mean what they do. And, it's a daily occurrence.
Is there anybody who does not need disability insurance?
If you are personally wealthy, right? So I always tell people, and this is probably the salesiest thing I ever say, but it really makes the impact. If your last paycheck was actually your last paycheck, would you be okay? If the answer is yes, God bless you, more power to you. You have made much better financial decisions than I have. But two, if, oh my God, I just totally lost my train of thought. Oh my God, what were we saying? Oh, who doesn't need it?
I love it.
Holy cow.
Okay.
So,
We're going to blame menopause.
oh my
instead of
God.
me.
So, yeah, please. So if you're independently wealthy and you really don't need your paycheck, fine, great, you don't need it. That's literally it. I mean, if you need your paycheck, you need disability insurance. I mean, it's really that simple.
I love it. I love it. So essentially, almost everybody
Pretty much.
that is not close to retirement, not ready to. And if you think about the pros and cons, and a lot of times when it comes to money, I talk about making sure we're fixing our money leak, regardless of how much net worth you have. If you have a huge gaping wound, you're just going to be earning. You're not going to be using the money to do the things you want to do. But I remind people that it's important to make sure you're not cutting out things that are of value.
Right.
Insurance is not what I'm talking about. So
Oh,
just
yeah.
FYI, y'all,
Yeah, I don't want to see people cut their nose to spite their face, right? And admittedly, I don't want people to eat cat food to have insurance, right? I mean, there is a give and take on cost benefit. And I will still say something is better than nothing, right? So even though people may qualify up here, doesn't mean you need to purchase that, right? Whatever the amount is, that's just a number that the companies are saying, this is the most coverage that we're willing to give you right now based on the math. And the math outside of training is set by the carriers. So they look at how much money do you make, what benefits do you have, and who pays for them because it affects taxation. And they spit out a number. It's not like you can say to me, Steph, I want $20,000 a month of benefit. I'm willing to pay for it. If the math doesn't work, I'm not a magician, right? They set those tones. They set the price. They set the product design, right? I have control over education, advocacy, and service. That's it, right? And I say that's it like it's nominal. I mean, that's the whole reason we exist. But it doesn't mean that you need to purchase it all. And I would rather see people get their foot in the door, have some benefit that we can work up and down. And going back to the contract not being written in blood, as you build wealth and have assets, you can decrease your benefit, right? It's not an all or nothing. And so I do speak to a decent number of more experienced physicians who have built wealth and are looking at ways to cut back, right? Maybe instead of a 90-day waiting period, 180 days is fine, right? You have a nest egg, you have other assets. We can manipulate things throughout your career. It's not set it and forget it.
I love it. I love that you said it's not set in blood. It's not set and forget. And I also think it's important to be able to talk to someone that is a decent human being and not just, and no one is perfect, but it is helpful to talk to someone that can say you don't, and I've sent people to you and there's some of them that you said, I think what you have is good. And I think even that just speaks to the importance of being a person of integrity, to be honest with you. So thanks for adding that part to the work that you do. I did have one more question for you as we come into the end of this, which is, this was a horrible experience for you that you ended up pivoting to now creating this stuff that is obviously creating great work, helping other physicians, being a financial source for you and your family as well. But I want you to talk about that in between, that going from being life sucks right now, because there are some people that are going through things. Maybe they just got fired. Maybe they got an injury. Maybe they got a diagnosis. Like something is happening that is causing a change for you. And you're like, I cannot even see above the water right now. Like what would you share with them from your experience and how you're able to eventually make that jump?
So admittedly, I was suicidal at one point. I thought that my children and husband were better off financially with me dead. I went through a lot of counseling, a lot of pharmacology. My husband brought home a puppy, which I wanted to kill him, but she actually saved my life. I got out of my own way, taking care of her, which it worked for me, right? Like I needed to get back to a life of service, which I don't want to sound hyperbolic. Truly, he said to me, you need to get out of bed and start taking care of something again. And when I went to the dog park, I was only Kim's mom. Like I didn't have to share my story. Nobody knew me as Dr. Pearson, right? I think that specifically if you're going through it right now is therapy. You have to let yourself grieve. I don't think that we give ourselves permission enough as physicians. Not, death isn't the only thing that you have to grieve, right? I mean, there are so many things that happen in our lives that don't work out the way that we planned. You have to give yourself a chance to grieve, and you have to go through the entire stages, right? Like that we learned in Psych 101. I think it's really important not to suffer in silence. There are now, social media groups and other outlets for people to find the people that they need. Ask for help. I know it's hard. Again, we live in this tyranny of perfection in medicine, but there are people going through it. No one is alone. I have yet to hear a story that I haven't heard before within reason. And I think, what worked for me was kind of trial and error, right? It was put yourself out there. We have so much to offer society that we just don't hear about. We don't think about. It's like, I felt like, oh my God, I'm an OBGYN. I'm overeducated, underemployable. And what else do I have, to make the world a better place? And everyone has knowledge and information that would help other people. And I think some of it is just allowing yourself that time to really get a little bit introspective of, what is my thing? And for me, like I said, it was not a straight line. But when I started talking about this and speaking to people, it just felt right, and it wasn't the first thing I did. It wasn't even the fifth thing that I did, right? So I think we have to also learn to give ourselves a little more grace than we do. But ultimately, it's a bump in the road. And listen, it is easier for me to say it. It's been 11 years and I still have bad days. I don't work on the anniversary of my last day as a clinician. I still cry every now and again about, not doing what I thought I was going to do. But it really comes down to, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to teach your children? What do you want to show the world, right? And for me, it was showing our children what survival looks like and what resilience looks like and how to pivot, and realizing that we're not one-trick ponies, that we truly all have more to give. I mean, look, you're a shining example, right? I am sure that when you were doing your GI fellowship, you were not thinking about MoneyFitMD, and here you are helping so many people, right? It's a life of service in a little bit of a different way. But I think that's why most of us go into medicine.
I love that. I mean, as you're sharing, I'm just thinking there's someone out there that's going to get this. And everything we've shared so far has been great and amazing. And there's someone that's out there that just needs to hear that last part. So I want to just thank you for sharing that with vulnerability, because sometimes it's easy to look and think that you're alone and think everybody else has it figured out. And the bottom line is we're all just on a journey. And your past does not have to define your future. Your injury does not have to stay that lowest point does not have to stay your forever story. And I love the practical tips that you shared on asking for help, finding your community, and getting the help you need, including therapy, including your psychiatrist. It's okay. You'll make it through this.
Well, thanks. Well, I think you're doing wonderful.
I want to say thank you.
Well, thank you.
It's been always a pleasure having you. I'm glad that I have someone that I trust that I can send my people to. And I don't say that lightly because, my women are important to me. So knowing that Stephanie and her team will guide them is something I don't take for granted. So from everybody that you serve and for those that are listening, I want to say thank you for what you do. And I'm sure I'm going to be seeing you sometime soon again.
I can't wait to see you soon.
All right, take care. Thanks, everybody. I hope this has been helpful. Make sure you share this with other women physicians. Share the link, text people. Let's get you taken care of. All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.